Those of you who followed the news closely may have realized that something's been happening the past few days. There was an election for the President of the United States. At the time I'm writing this, on the night of Friday, November 6th, no winner has yet been declared. That said, Biden has been pulling ahead in several key states, and Trump's path to victory looks ever slimmer. This change has led to significant outcry, both from voters and Trump himself. They are claiming significant voter fraud has changed the course of election. That would be a very bad thing. A president who won by cheating and fraud would be a slap in the face of America. But what evidence is there to support this theory? I'm hopeful that a careful look at the data and the claims that are being made can help clear up some of the misinformation spreading around right now. The first question to address is if, as some claim, these mail-in and absentee ballots that are being counted hold signs of rampant illegal votes for Biden. This idea can be checked. Some lovely folks over at GitHub have been compiling the results of the election, looking at each time votes were reported and recording the information starting the day after the election, just after noon. Those are largely the mail-in and absentee ballots that have received so much attention. I calculated exactly what percentage of these late votes went for each candidate at each time, and graphed it out for a few swing states. Now, if there were widespread tampering with these votes, we would see one of the following. Biden would be receiving an absurdly high percentage of the votes. Or maybe a change in the percentage over time as those nefarious meddlers get more involved in their tampering. Or anything else that looks planned or notably fishy. As is, the data in Pennsylvania looks like this. It's not a very pretty graph, is it? We can see a few things from this information. You can actually tell when it's nighttime, for example, as there were fewer votes counted at these sections here. But overall, this is a very messy graph, as we'd expect to see from a statewide election. While there's lots of short-term variation, the overall trend is very stable over time, ruling out that option that there's a change in percentages over time. That stability sits at an overall average of about 67%. Not only is that number not eye-poppingly large, it actually makes a lot of sense based on what we knew about mail-in votes coming into this election. Polling done by Pew all the way back in September showed that Democrats were twice as likely as Republicans to vote by mail. That matches very well with the 2/3, 1/3 split we are observing in these mail-in ballots. So, while the vote favors Biden, they favor him no more than was expected going into the election. If you head over to Georgia, yeah, it's the same story here. In fact, these votes were even closer, with 60% of the late votes being counted for Biden. I also checked how it looks in Arizona, and it's actually the opposite. This is how he ended up with those simultaneous calls for stopping and continuing to count the vote in different states at the same time. But importantly, neither location has any evidence of fraud. It's just continuing to count votes in a quite tight election season. Numerically, there is no evidence to suggest that there is some kind of widespread voter fraud going on. That said, there are a lot of other claims being made right now, and I'd like to take some time to myth-bust some of the ones that are particularly prevalent and particularly troubling. For example, much has been made of this image, showing Biden receiving 128,000 votes all at once in Michigan, while Trump received none. Ultimately, this is just not an accurate image. This happened only because of a minor data input error on this particular election map. No one reported those votes coming in. It was just simply someone who put them into the system incorrectly. They fixed the issue. Even the person who tweeted out the image deleted it and acknowledged that it was inaccurate. Who hasn't deleted the tweet yet? That would be the sitting president, the source of much of the misinformation spreading right now. One of Trump's most frequent claims has centered on poll watchers. Many have pointed to the incident in Detroit, where windows at a polling place were covered up. The context for this incident seems to have been lost on many. Some observers were still present, but the mass of individuals who had gathered were illegally videotaping the proceedings, risking spreading personal information. Just asking a few questions and doing your research can really help soothe some of these suspicious situations that are going around. Trump has further fueled the fire by filing baseless lawsuits against many locations, claiming that his base was not allowed to watch the polls. Even Trump's campaign seemed to know that they were lying, however. In Philadelphia, a Trump attorney squirmed when asked if they were allowed in, saying there were a non-zero number of people in the room. Trump has a storied history of lying to his base, And this is a dangerous extension of that habit. Now look, some voter fraud has undoubtedly happened this election cycle. It does every year. Trump may have even been right on some of his wild claims about malpractice. After all, a broken clock is right twice a day, and here it has 150 million chances to strike. We will continue to hear more about this election for years to come, and it is certain we will come to learn about these specific instances of fraud. That said, those individual stories cannot amount to Biden illegally stealing the election. Besides, Trump isn't any more entitled to power than anyone else is. It all comes back to the people, and they have clearly decided who has earned that office.